Most Americans are descended from immigrants to the New World. You may wonder, when did my ancestors come to America? Where did they come from? What were conditions like in America and in their old country when they immigrated? What were their experiences like as immigrants? Genealogical research can sometimes answer these questions. Here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to go over immigration time periods, some research tips, 15 different types of records for finding your immigrant ancestor, what to do if your ancestor was enslaved, and resources. U.S. immigration and naturalization have changed over the years with regard to the governing authority, the most common ports of entry, the rules, the documents produced, and the nationality and ethnicity of the immigrants. Understanding these changes will make you a better researcher because you will know what documents are possible for each time period and where to find them. During the colonial period, the British had colonies along the East Coast, while Spain had colonies in Florida and the Southwest, and France had colonies in Louisiana and the central part of the country. The British Crown, and later the colonies as well, could make rules and give permission for people to immigrate and become naturalized citizens. Even after the United States was created, there was still no central governing authority over immigration and no central place to find records. You might find records for pre-1820 immigration in an archive, a museum, a courthouse, or an attic. Passenger lists were not required by law until the Steerage Act was passed in 1819. So for pre-1820 research, search published index books and genealogy journals for lists and indices. Realize that there likely was not a passenger list. For post-1820 research, the National Archives and the Family History Library have comprehensive collections of microfilmed passenger lists. You can also find passenger lists at regional archives, major libraries, family history centers, the Ellis Island website, or on Ancestry or Family Search. Experts say that somewhere between 10% to 40% of post-1820 passenger lists have been lost, so you may not find one even after 1820. Most of these research tips apply to any type of genealogy research. Work backwards in time, concentrating on 1 to 2 family lines at a time so you will understand each family group in more depth. Research extended family, friends, and neighbors because people have always lived in groups. The record of one member of the group may tell you something about another group member. Wildcards are symbols used in place of unknown letters in a word when you are searching genealogy databases and don't know an exact spelling. Use the 5-element genealogical proof standard. 1 is reasonably exhaustive research has been conducted. 2, each statement of fact has a complete and accurate source citation. 3, the evidence is reliable and has been skillfully correlated and interpreted. 4, any contradictory evidence has been resolved. And 5, the conclusion has been soundly reasoned and coherently written. Any proof statement must be reevaluated when new evidence arises. Search U.S. records first before you search foreign records, both because U.S. records will be more recent for your immigrant ancestor and because you would need to know a foreign language to evaluate foreign records. Study social history, which examines the social, economic, and cultural factors related to a group of people. Understanding how these factors affected your ancestor's ethnic group makes it easier for you to determine which records you should seek first and where you might find them. Read ethnic how-to books and join ethnic genealogy groups to help you understand what records and techniques work best for that group. Share your findings with others so that they can benefit and they can also offer you suggestions. If you want to find your immigrant ancestors' arrival records, you'll need to know some details about them before you can search. You'll need to know the full original name as well as any spelling variations that might have been used. You'll need to know about how old your ancestor was upon arrival, as well as approximately when he or she arrived. It also helps if you know the country and ethnic group of your ancestor. It's a big help to know the ports of departure and arrival and realize that there may have been several. Our ancestors may not have had a nonstop boat ride here. Each record you find about your ancestor represents a specific time in his or her life. Make a timeline to record how the events flowed through time. Timelines help you see conflicts in evidence. They show you where your research has missing pieces of information. Timelines can help you sort out two people of the same name. Timelines are also a good way to organize your evidence to meet the genealogical evidence standards. This example is not complete and it is not well researched, and I didn't include full Chicago manual style citations in order to save space. But the example does show you how you can structure a timeline. I'm going to show you 15 record types that could help you find your immigrant ancestor. There are other sources you could use that I did not mention, such as federal land records and genealogy periodicals. These record types should get you well on the way to discover your immigrant ancestors. Oral history is a great place to begin researching your immigrant ancestors. Talk to your relatives, especially older relatives who might know details about family history that younger members don't know. Are there family stories or traditions that have been passed down about immigrant ancestors? Sometimes the stories sound incredible. They might be true or false, or a nugget of truth inside a bundle of fiction. Pay attention to details in the family stories. These details may help you solve mysteries. Family Bibles, scrapbooks, diaries, letters, all should be searched. Contact extended family to see who might have old papers or photos that might contain hints as to the hometown of your ancestor. Find your ancestor in every census he or she would have appeared in. The year of immigration was asked in the 1900, 1910, 1920, and 1930 federal censuses. The date recorded may not always be the same. Our ancestors were not constantly asked to verify dates as we are now, so they may have given the wrong date sometimes. Or the census informant may have not known the exact date. Census records are super important for two reasons. First, they help establish a timeline of where the ancestor lived in certain places at certain times and who were the family members. Second, census records can tell you where family members were born and when they came to this country. The chart on this slide shows which census years asked questions relevant to immigration and naturalization. 1850 was the first year that the census asked place of birth. 1870 also asked whether parents were of foreign birth. 1870 through 1930 asked the place of birth of both parents, and 1880 through 1950 asked about citizenship status. The 1900, 1910, 1920, and 1930 federal census asked, is the household member naturalized? And the 1920 federal census asked for the specific year of naturalization. Don't forget state census records. The New York State Census asks, is the household member a naturalized voter? In every state census from 1855 onward. The 1925 state census asks the year and location of naturalization. Vital records are records of births, marriages, and deaths. This is an 1890 birth record from Cleveland, Ohio. It gives us the mother's maiden name as well as the information that she was born in Germany. Many places didn't create official statewide birth records until the early 1900s to 1920s. In some states, vital records were kept by individual counties. If there are no vital records for the place and time you are researching, you can find birth information from census records, military records, newspapers, church records, or cemeteries. This is a 1928 death certificate from Fairbanks, Alaska. It is likely that your ancestor lived before vital records were officially kept. Alternatives to death certificates for finding death information include military records, census records, newspapers, church records, tax lists, cemeteries, or wills and probate. This is an 1872 marriage certificate from Boston, Massachusetts that I found on Family Search. It tells us that the husband was born in Ireland. Alternative sources for marriage information include church records, city and county civil registrations, family Bibles and diaries, newspapers, obituaries, and submitted genealogies posted by others. Be sure not to trust another person's genealogy unless they provide good citations for each fact stated. Consider that when an eloping couple's marriage is not in their home county, it might be in a nearby county in the same state. If they live near a state line, it might be in a county in the neighboring state. Military records can give you hints about your immigrant ancestor. This is a World War I draft registration card, and it gives the date of birth as well as the country of origin, which was Croatia, Austria-Hungary. Obituaries and gravestones can give you hints about your ancestors' immigration. The obituary on this slide tells us that Mr. Fulton was born in Nova Scotia in 1869 and immigrated to the U.S. when he was 6 years old, which would make his arrival year 1865. The gravestone on this slide tells us that the mother was born in Poland in 1874. Online memorials such as Find a Grave, Billion Graves, or Legacy.com can also give you hints. Church records can give you hints about your immigrant ancestor's place of origin. This is a 1916 diocesan confirmation register of the Episcopal Church in the Diocese of Pennsylvania that I found on Family Search. The confirmation register tells us that Mrs. Elizabeth Crawford at the bottom of the page was born in Ireland. In the Northwest Library Genealogy Department, we have a great how-to book on finding church records that I highly recommend, and I've got a picture of the book on the right side of the slide. If possible, get complete Social Security records for your ancestors. What is a complete Social Security record? It is the SS5, which is the form that was used to apply for a Social Security number. You can see the blank one from the Social Security website on the slide. The application for a Social Security number is full of helpful information. First, middle, and last name, present mailing address, age at last birthday, date of birth, place of birth, including city, county, and state, father's full name, mother's full maiden name, race or color, and finally date and signature. You can order the SS5 if the person on the record has given written consent, or if you can prove that the person on the record died at least 3 years ago, or if the person on the record was born over 120 years ago. In the resources section of this presentation, I'll give you the link to a good blog post on how to order the SS5. You never know what you'll find in digitized or microfilmed historic newspaper collections. This is an article from the August 5, 1908 edition of the Laramie Republican that tells about a dinner that was held in honor of Laramie's earliest pioneers, many of whom attended the dinner. The article tells the names of each attendee, as well as where he was born and when he came to Laramie. The ones from foreign countries I surrounded with a yellow box so you can see them. Don't forget native language newspapers of ethnic communities in the United States. If you can read your ancestors' language, you can find and search these newspapers. To look for them, you can search Chronicling America's newspaper directory by language using the drop-down menu in the box that I surrounded with a yellow rectangle. My search showed that there have been 2,583 German language newspapers in the United States. Published family histories can tell you about the origins of your immigrant ancestors. Published local histories can tell you about the foreign origins of a county's inhabitants, who might just be your family. Public libraries are a great place to find family and local histories. Another good source is Family Search's digital library of books. Google Books and HathiTrust are other good places to look. When people think about immigration research, passenger lists is the first thing that comes to mind. Don't forget that official passenger lists did not begin until 1820. This is a list of Chinese laborers returning to the U.S. Mr. Chun Wang departed on a ship named Peking on 21 October 1822 and arrived in San Francisco on 13 September 1885. You can find passenger lists on Family Search, Ancestry, Steve Morse's website, Ellis Island's website, and others. Steve Morse's website is unique in that it has gathered links to dozens of passenger lists in one place. I'll give you the Steve Morse web address and more information about his website in the resources section. Naturalization records are the documents created in the process of becoming a citizen. Naturalization records vary depending on the time period. The records on the slide show some of the naturalization records that you might find from various time periods. I could do an entire class just on naturalization, so I'm just going to hit the high points here. In early colonial times, the government would issue letters of denization to naturalized citizens, or an act of parliament could naturalize them. Oaths of allegiance were taken as people disembarked from a ship. Later, individual colonies could grant naturalization. After the American Revolution, states could grant naturalization, and documents were filed with local county courts. The first Naturalization Act was in 1790. In 1906, the Federal Bureau of Immigration and Naturalization was created. When immigrants arrived in America, most of them wanted to become citizens. If you can't find naturalization records for your ancestors, it may be that they were never naturalized. Scholars who analyzed census records for 1890 through 1930 estimated that 25.7% of them were never naturalized. Passports and border crossing records are another source of information about your immigrant ancestors. On the left side of the slide, you can see the 1923 border crossing record of George Fred Thompson, who immigrated from Canada. On the right side of the screen, you can see a page from the book titled Passports Issued by Governors of Georgia, 1785 to 1809. It shows a passport to enter the Creek Nation issued by Georgia's governor to James Smith of Liberty County, Georgia on 9 August 1798. During times of war, the government began requiring people from enemy countries to register at a local post office. On the slide, you can see a 1918 San Francisco, California registration affidavit of enemy alien. Alien registrations were required of German and Japanese America from 1940 through 1944 during World War II as well. Searching foreign immigration records requires you to know the language of the old country. There are immigration lists for Germany as well as port of departure lists for Hamburg, Germany, and Scandinavian ports. People would get letters of recommendation from the church in the old country, both to help them get a visa and to help them join a church in the new country. Shipping companies kept records about ships that left port, and these records could include passengers lists. There are Hamburg passenger lists on microfilm at the Family History Library. Don't forget to look for the sale of land in the old country to finance the trip and to give your ancestors a new start. There are port of departure lists and port of arrival lists. Searching foreign immigration records is more difficult than searching American immigration and naturalization records, and of course it requires you to know the language. The card on this slide is from Family Search's European Immigration Card Index, 1849 through 1925. Amanda Peterson sailed from Liverpool, England on 15 September 1875 aboard the ship Wyoming, arrived in New York on September 27th, then traveled to Salt Lake City by train, arriving on 5th October 1875. If your ancestor was enslaved, the slaver ships that transported them from Africa listed them as cargo, usually only in age and sex categories with no individual names. So it is very rare that you can prove you have found the exact ship that your ancestors came on. You might find evidence pointing to your ancestor's ship if the enslaver kept records of where, when, and from whom he purchased your ancestor. This is a very difficult and time-consuming task that should only be tackled by experienced genealogy researchers. If you do decide to tackle finding the slave ship, Here are some tips that could help. In her book, Finding a Place Called Home, A Guide to African American Genealogy and Historical Identity, D. Palmer Woodtor, Ph.D., says that by 1790, nearly all Africans to be imported into this country had already arrived. So the first step to find your ancestors' immigration records is to trace your family back to the 1700s, which is not possible for everyone. Here are pieces of information that would help you possibly learn more about your ancestors' transportation to the New World. Knowing the enslaver's name gives you the ability to search that person's records. You might look for the enslaver's diary, where he might have mentioned slave purchases. You could look for the slave merchant's account books for records of sales. You'll want to find out whether naval shipping lists of the period survived. There are transcriptions of naval shipping lists from Virginia and South Carolina, where the wealthiest planters who were most likely to own a large number of slaves lived during colonial times. Look for diaries of slave crew members or shipmasters. The information on this slide came from Dr. Woodtor's book, which I highly recommend. We have a copy of it at Northwest Library in the Genealogy Department. DNA testing can give you clues. Companies such as Ancestry DNA, 23andMe, and African Ancestry offer DNA testing kits that can tell you your ethnic makeup and ancestry. They can even identify specific regions in Africa where your ancestors may have come from. The Transatlantic Slave Database, formerly on CD-ROM and now at slavevoyages.org, provides information about more than 36,000 voyages that forcibly transported enslaved Africans across the Atlantic between 1514 and 1866. The vast majority of names included in the database are those of ship owners and captains. The African Origins and Oceans of Kinfolks datasets are an exception, which you'll see on the next slide. The African Origins dataset includes personal details of 95,153 Africans taken from slave ships, mostly captured by anti-slave trade patrols or from African trading sites between 1808 and 1862. Users can view the personal details of Africans liberated from slave vessels, hear their names pronounced, and contribute to the project by suggesting the likely language origins of the names on the records. The Oceans of Kinfolk dataset includes the personal details of 63,562 people transported to New Orleans, and in many cases records on the people who transported, bought, and sold them there. Users can analyze the name, age, gender, origin, place of embarkation, and disembarkation of these individuals and some of their linkages to enslavers. In Motion, the African American migration experience says that it provides a new interpretation of African American history, one that focuses on the self-motivated activities of people of African descent to remake themselves in their worlds. In the website section on the transatlantic slave trade, it explains the European and African port cities that were involved in the slave trade. 450,000 Africans survived the Middle Passage and disembarked in North America. They made up only 5% of all the slaves forcibly transported. The other 95% went to plantations in Brazil and the Caribbean. On March 2, 1807, Congress outlawed the slave trade. This law also regulated the coastwise transportation of slaves. Effective January 1, 1808, vessels under 40 tons in coastwise trade were prohibited from transporting slaves. The captain or master of vessels over 40 tons in coastwise trade was required to provide a manifest of slave cargo to the collector of customs at the port of departure and at the port of arrival, or to the surveyor if there was no collector of customs at the port. Ancestry and Family Search both have a database called Louisiana New Orleans Slave Manifests of Coastwise Vessels, 1807 through 1860. These databases are based on microfilm holdings at the National Archives, which I'll show you. NARA has 30 rolls of microfilm called Publication M 1895, Slave Manifests of Coastwise Vessels filed at New Orleans, Louisiana, 1807 through 1860. The microfilm shows images of reproduced manifests that were filed with the collectors of customs at New Orleans, Louisiana, of slaves transported in coastwise trade to or from New Orleans during the period 1807 through 1860. Even if your ancestors were not African, they still might have been sent to the New World as slaves or convicts, and there are records and research resources about them too. There are books in the Pines Library System and in Northwest Library's Genealogy Department where you can find more information. Now I'm going to give you some good resources on the topic of immigration. The three books on the screen, They Came in Ships, They Became Americans, and Guide to Naturalization Records of the United States, are excellent how-to books on immigration research, but there are many others available in the Pines Library System. For pre-1820 research, these are some classic works that contain indices of early settlers and immigrants. Cavaliers and Pioneers, The Early Settlers of Maryland, Philby's Passenger and Immigration Lists Index, Coldham's Complete Book of Immigrants, and Dobson's Directory of Scottish Settlers in North America. There are other works for other ethnic groups, so this list is not exhaustive. We have all of these at Northwest Library in the Genealogy Department. There are how-to books for specific European ethnic groups in the Pines Library System and at Northwest Library. We also have books about tracing African Americans who were, or Africans who were captured and brought to North America or transported within it. Whenever I begin to research a topic or location that is new to me, I look at the Family Search Wiki to get the lay of the land. The wiki is like an online genealogy encyclopedia. You can search the wiki for topics or for locations or both. On the slide, you can see the wiki page on immigration and immigration. The Family Search Wiki also has a section on U.S. naturalization and citizenship. Family search databases are a great place to search for immigration, naturalization, and other types of records. But don't limit yourself to searching records by filling out the query box. Query box searches only retrieve records that have been indexed. Many genealogy records are unindexed, image-only collections. Learn how to use the Family Search image-only collections by viewing my class on Family Search. If you search image-only collections, you'll find treasures that otherwise would have been undiscovered. Once you have entered the Family Search catalog, you can narrow by category in the gray box on the left side of the screen. You can also filter the results by location, time period, and/or language. Make sure to check the online button so that your results will include only those that are digitized for you to view online, unless you're planning a trip to the Family History Library in Salt Lake City. There are two categories you'll want to check. One is migration and citizenship, and the other is ethnic, political, or religious groups. When I searched migration and citizenship, there were 7,331 databases listed. The ethnic, political, or religious groups category contains 7,028 databases. You can also search Ancestry's catalog. You can click on the Search tab, then select Card Catalog from the drop-down menu, which is in the yellow box. Once in the card catalog, you can search by keyword inside the orange box, and you can narrow your results by topic, location, and date, as you can see in the turquoise box. Another database the library provides for you free is Heritage Quest Online. It has an excellent collection of immigration records as well. The National Archives has a section of its website on immigration and naturalization records that is very helpful. And don't forget the National Archives website I mentioned earlier on slave ship manifests filed at New Orleans. Steve Morse's one-step website offers flexible searching to many other genealogy databases. Instead of searching for individual passenger list databases, you can search them all in one place. He says this site contains tools for finding immigration records, census records, vital records, and for dealing with calendars, maps, foreign alphabets, and numerous other applications. Some of these tools fetch data from other websites, but do so in more versatile ways than the search tools provided on those websites. He has links to over 30 passenger list websites, and he uses a dollar symbol to indicate which websites are free versus subscription only. Cindy's list of genealogy websites has a section on immigration that you can explore. German Roots is a fabulous resource for anyone with European immigrant ancestors, not just those with German ancestors. Despite its visually plain appearance, the website contains wonderful information. You'll find a full menu of options on the home page, but you'll focus on the immigration and immigration records page for your immigration research. There is a passenger arrival records section with links to online passenger lists arranged by port. There are also descriptions of online and offline resources for both the pre- and post-1820 time periods. In the International Passenger Departure Records and Immigration Records section, you'll find links divided by country of departure, including Germany, Sweden, the Netherlands, and the United Kingdom. Castle Garden formerly had a database where you could research passenger lists. These records can now be searched on Family Search's database, New York Passenger Lists 1820 through 1891. By the late 1880s, Castle Garden had become overwhelmed with arrivals. Also, there was negative public sentiment towards immigrants, so government officials changed their focus from providing a resource center to immigrants and instead focused on screening for health and other issues at Ellis Island. The Ellis Island website has a huge database with records for 51 million people who arrived between 1892 and 1957. The search page will lead you to possible matches that link to digitized images of passenger lists. Because of the vast amount of materials available, finding a match can take some patience, and it often takes more than one try. Certified genealogist Kimball G. Carter's Genealogy Puzzles Solved website has an excellent section on figuring out the location of your ancestor's hometown. Family Tree magazine has a helpful online article on researching immigrant families. Judy Russell, also known as the legal genealogist, gives a good explanation of how to order the SS5 Complete Social Security application on her Legal Genealogist blog. This digital collection of historical materials from Harvard University documents voluntary immigration to the United States from the signing of the Constitution to the start of the Great Depression. The collection primarily focuses on 19th century, and it includes over 400,000 pages from more than 2,200 books, pamphlets, and serials, and over 9,600 pages from manuscript and archival collections, and more than 7,800 photographs. Thank you for joining me in this overview of immigration and naturalization. Please join us next month as we learn more about using city directories for genealogy. Until then, happy researching!